Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. Today's video is a 3-month follow-up impression slash review thoughts on my use of the Fujifilm X-H2S, which I have now used to replace my Fujifilm X-T3, which I used for about 3.5 years. So very different cameras. I'll talk about my thoughts and what I think and what I like and what I don't like. And I'm going to kind of work backwards. I'm going to start with some initial kind of overall impressions and my thoughts, but make sure you stay tuned to the end because as you probably are aware, if you're a Fujifilm camera fan, there are more cameras out now and one more coming besides just the X-H2S. So I'll give some thoughts on that at the end. Additionally, I'll have chapter markers in the descriptions below. Also below, I will link to some videos that I found helpful in my consideration of the X-H2S and also some different use cases than mine specifically around using the X-H2S, so you can maybe have a more well-rounded experience about what this camera might or might not do for you. So in getting started, one of the things I think is important is for you to understand my context so that you can see the framework I'm using for evaluating this camera. Obviously, with cameras or any electronic gear or most things we use in life, it's very personal. So my use will be different than yours, my preferences will be different than yours, and as I start all my reviews, pretty much I say 3 things. 1, there's no perfect cameras. There just aren't. 2, there's really no bad cameras. So that's a comfort as well. And then the third thing is what I just kind of alluded to is we're going to have different experiences, different preferences. So hopefully I give you enough context here that will help, again, inform your decision, your thoughts on the X-H2S. So before we do anything else, let me tell you a little bit about how I use this camera, my typical photography use case. So here it is. I'm not a full-time photographer. My full-time job, if you will, my day job, is as a photography instructor at Highline College near Seattle, Washington. So obviously photography is a big part of my life in my job. For personal use of the camera, I have kind of 2 paths I take. I have the personal, which is the bulk of what I do, and those are videos for photos for this channel, photos for personal use. There's a lot of street photography, some nature and landscape in there as well. And then on the professional side, which is part-time for me, very part-time, maybe a total of 12 professional projects a year, 3 or 4 weddings, some other things along the way. So yeah, that's a little bit of my context. I mostly do video for use here on YouTube, and the camera that's recording this right now, just full disclosure, is the Fujifilm X-T3. So again, my context of using this camera is a lot of photography, probably 90–95% photography, 5 to 10% video use, and I hope that helps you understand and put in context what we're going to talk about next. So overall, I really like the X-H2S. That's kind of a spoiler alert for this whole thing. I'm glad I got the camera. It was a significant upgrade in lots of ways that I'll talk more specifically about coming up. But the main thing is the experience of creating photos with this camera versus my X-T3 or previous X-series cameras, which I've used for 8 years, is I really enjoy it a lot more. There's lots to like about this camera. Obviously, it's a significant investment at $2,500 US, but for certain use cases, I think it's a really good choice. Lots of video reviews. Save this next part for last. I'm going to jump in here and drop in some comments about image quality. And to my eye, the image quality is 1, excellent, and 2, similar, if not almost exactly the same, at least to my eyes, as the previous generation processor cameras, sensor cameras, the X-T3 and X-T4. On paper, from what I've seen, some of the specs on the X-H2S, especially around dynamic range, are better than the T3 and the T4, but to my eye, I'm not really seeing a difference, and I'm okay with that. I really like the image quality that came out of the T3 that I'd been using for a long time, so I don't feel a really strong need to have better image quality, whatever that means. So think of it this way. Here's an analogy I'll use. Think about cars. Cars our destination really hasn't changed. So like I can drive to work. But what has changed is my experience of getting to that destination. So for example, my 3-year-old Subaru Crosstrek is a different experience than driving my wife's almost 15-year-old Mazda 3. In the Subaru, I've got a little bit higher ride. I've got all-wheel drive. I've got Bluetooth. I've got CarPlay. I've got little comfier ride. I've got, let's see what else, keyless start and automatic, all that cool stuff, backup camera, all these things we kind of just expect in our modern cars. So even though there's a big age difference in the two cars, the thing that changes is not how I get there, but the experience of getting there. I take the same route, it takes about the same amount of time, but it's a little comfier, more enjoyable. I look forward to more to the drive in the newer car than the older car. So that's the analogy I'll use with these camera, and I think for most camera manufacturers, what they're working on improving now is the overall experience of photography rather than the specific results improving dramatically in image quality, technically, or even aesthetically. So if you can kind of manage your expectations around that it's the experience that changes and the features that you have available in the camera now, that's what you're getting with the upgrade, with the change, more so than specific image quality improvements. One area of image quality that I was really curious about to see if any different or the same was with high ISO noise and what that looked like. I've not done a lot with high ISO situations. I did have a wedding that went through to the night in a forest setting, which was kind of fun. And I'll show you some of those photos and zoom in a little bit so you can see the ISO noise. So this photo is at ISO 3200, so not super high ISO, at least in my experience. And here's at a normal viewing, fit to screen. So let's zoom in and see what that looks like, what the noise is doing, and here we go. Here's 200%, and let's move around a little bit, and you can see this has pretty much got typical Fuji noise patterns. It's a relatively, in my opinion, organic looking noise. There is some color noise that I've taken out here. Let's turn off the noise reduction so you can see that. So there you go. I'm not sure how well this is showing up in the YouTube compression, but you can hopefully see a little bit of improvement with noise reduction as far as the color noise primarily is going away. And then the overall image quality is, I think, great. I'm at 1/60th of a second, so the in-body image stabilization is helping here as far as holding still and allowing me not to turn it up even one more notch. So to 6,400. So my experience with the X-H2S is the ISO performance at higher levels, 3,200, 6,400, even 12,800, is very, very similar, if not almost identical, to the X-T3 and X-T4 noise performance. I don't mind it that much. I try to avoid it a little bit, and the in-body image stabilization helps a little bit in allowing me, especially with subjects that aren't moving or moving slower, to use maybe a little bit slower shutter speed, keep the ISO down, just one stop, and I like the results. So let's talk next about the S. The S in the X-H2S, I think, stands for speed. So one of the things that we get with this camera, and one of the reasons it costs a fair bit more than the XT series previously, and even the recently announced and released the X-H2, is the stacked image sensor. What that stacked image sensor gets you is faster readout, which means it dumps the data through the pipeline much more quickly, and the processor is more powerful, so it can handle all that. Those sensors, I understand, are harder to manufacture, more complicated, so they cost more. So that's the main thing you're paying for with this camera, is you're getting speed. And in my experience with this camera, it's a lot faster. So much faster. It's a drastic difference in autofocus performance, especially that's the biggest change I've noticed. High-speed burst mode of 15 frames per second is just staggeringly awesome, and it's nice to have that. I'm really grateful for it, even though I don't use it a ton. it's nice to know it's there. Kind of like the all-wheel drive on my Subaru. It doesn't snow a lot here, but I'm glad I have that option when I need it. It's a good safety net. One of the things that surprised me that I'm enjoying about using the X-H2S is the electronic shutter release versus the old mechanical release on the T-series cameras. And what I'm liking about it is more sensitive, which I had to get adjusted to at first. But what it allows me to do is I don't even have to change my drive mode to a burst mode, and I can just do some really quick, gentle taps and get a quick burst of photos much more effectively and efficiently than I could with the old style on the T-series camera of the mechanical release. So I can get 2, 3, maybe even 4 frames a second with just quick shutter presses without even going to continuous low on the drive mode. So one of the things that happens with speed is heat. I want to talk just a little bit about my experience with heat issues with this camera, and I've had it happen twice, where the camera warned me, gave me the on-screen warning that there was heat issues going on, and they were in 2 situations. The first was when I first had the camera and I was doing setup. I was setting up the custom dials, configuring those, which was about an hour of button pressing and moving around, and the camera got noticeably hot to the touch, and it gave me the overheating warning, so I just shut it off for about 30 seconds, turned it back on, finished that work, and was good to go. The other experience I had with overheating was at a wedding on a hot summer day in an unair-conditioned church, and the camera got warm. I was just doing photos, not even a lot of continuous low stuff. I don't feel like I was really working the camera hard. It was just the external environment that was making it hot. I did have the screen open, so that was getting a little more ventilation back here. I don't have the external fan, but I did get the warning. Again, I shut the camera down 10, 15 seconds, went back to photographing, and all was good. So I just got the warning once. It didn't shut down, but I shut it down preemptively, and everything seemed to be okay after that. So your mileage may vary on that. So the H in X-H2S stands for hybrid. At least that's what the internet told me, so that must be true. So hybrid is obviously photo and video. I know the T-series have 3 and 4 especially have been great video cameras. This camera though has a lot more functionality around video. You get 4K 120, you get all sorts of ProRes stuff that I'm not going to use right now. Video capabilities are just immensely larger with this camera than any of the previous T-series or even the X-H1. So I don't use most of that yet. It's nice again to know it's there. I have done a little bit with 4K 120, which I really like the look of with this camera. I'll show some footage here. I've also really liked the F-Log2. I like the way it grades. I think it works really, really well. It gives me a little extra dynamic range. And the place I'm noticing that most is in the car intros on my street photography videos, where it's kind of a little bit darker in the car and you've got the bright light outside the car window. So I've really enjoyed using that. It's been helpful to me. But again, I'm just scratched the surface on what this camera is capable with video. But I'm really enjoying finding out what it's capable of, trying some new things. So stay tuned for more in the future. One of the things I like about the setup of this camera in the hybrid setup is I can go immediately to video recording with one button push, and it'll use the settings that are on the video mode dial, or I can switch to a custom mode that's set up for video and then use the shutter. So the neat thing is the separation of video from photo settings, whereas on the T-series, the T3 especially, that I'm used to using, if I wanted to do a video, I would have to change shutter speed, then switch in ISO, and then when I switch back to photo, I have to switch it all back for photo mode. So it was a lot of faffing around, and this is much simpler to switch from one mode to another, and it encouraged me to try video in situations where I wouldn't before. As I mentioned in my analogy, the main difference in using this camera, the X-H2S, over my previous camera, the X-T3, is the experience. Not the end result photo, but the experience of creating the photo. So for me, the first thing you notice with this camera is the ergonomics. It's much different than the T-Series camera. The dial setup is different. You have the larger grip, although I do have a small rig grip on this. It's a little larger and heavier than a T3 or T4 without the grip, but I like the extra size. It gives me a better grip for my size hand. I think the extra weight also gives me a little more mass in holding the camera that helps dampen some of my older person shakiness that I'm noticing more and more as I get older. So I appreciate that. The extra weight is helpful to me. It's a matter of ounces or a few grams, but it doesn't bother me. I know, again, that's not for everybody. Some people want the lightest camera. One of the things I'm getting used to is using the command dials versus the traditional control dials. I'm almost there. It's still a little muscle memory learning. I have 8 years with the older school command dials, but I'm getting closer. I really like the custom dial, having 7 settings there. I think I have 4 or 5 set up. I'm in the process of finishing that setup because it takes a little bit of time, and as I mentioned earlier, it can cause the camera to get hot. One of the things additionally that I really like about this camera is the much improved battery life over the T3 with the smaller batteries. Now I have larger batteries, so I can go much longer with less batteries, which I'm really grateful for. An example of that, about a month ago, I went out with the X-T1. I took that off the shelf from back there and went out and did some photos. And I didn't even last an hour before I had to change the battery. I can go 2-ish hours with the kind of way I photograph before I need to change a battery in this. Probably even longer if depending on, again, the specific use case, including using video in those situations. So the battery life is so much better. It's nice to not have to worry about taking literally 4, 5, 6 batteries that I used to on longer days with the T3 cameras. So thank you, Fuji, for that. Really appreciate that. Next up, I'd like to talk about my wish list of features, changes, maybe firmware or future things in hardware even that I'd really like to see on this camera. One, first, is the ability to assign the ISO to one of the command dials, front or back. I know in manual exposure mode, some lenses now don't have an aperture dial, so you would need to use the command dial for that, and that's maybe why they haven't set this up. But I would love to be able to have one of these front or rear command dials assignable to ISO, because currently I have to push the ISO button and then turn the dial. So I don't really like that. It's a little clunkier to change ISO, and I prefer to set my own ISO and shutter speed and aperture full manual. So it's a little clunkier, but my workaround is I just set it somewhere safe, the ISO, maybe around 800, which I'm happy with image quality, and then just adjust shutter speed and aperture as needed to kind of work with that ISO. There you go. Another feature request I would love would be for Fuji to borrow this feature from Sony that on some of their cameras, when you take the lens off, the shutter closes. I would really like that for not getting as much crud on the sensor that I seem to get. I don't know if my sensor is unique to this, but it seems to like to get dust and little particles on there that obviously show up as sensor dust spots in my photos and take extra time to get rid of. So I'd love to have that feature where you closes the shutter when the lens is removed. Second thing, I don't know, maybe this is user error. Occasionally when I open the rear screen and bring it out here, I have the touchscreen turned off because usually my nose is on there because I'm a left eye shooter. So every once in a while, even when I have touchscreen turned off, when I've opened it and then I'm doing photos and then I go to close it, it'll click because somehow the screen got activated. Again, that might be user error. If you know what's causing that, that I might be doing with something in the photography experience, let me know in the comments below. I'd really appreciate some assistance there. Or Fuji, fix it. Another ISO control request I have is the ability to change the direction of the scroll up or down depending on which direction I move. The current setup feels opposite. I'm always going the wrong direction with the first 2 clicks, so I have to then adjust. That's my request. It could again be just because I'm left-handed, so there you go. Another overall command dial setting change I would like, and if I remember correctly, my Nikons would let me do this. I would like to be able to move in full stop increments rather than third stop increments. So when I'm changing shutter speed, I'm at 1/60th of a second. I just want to go to 1/125th, not I think it goes to 180, then 1/100th. I'll use Lightroom to get those third stop adjustments in my style of photographing. So that would help me get more quickly from one extreme to the other if I'm just moving in full stop. Same with ISO, and that would be helpful to my photography if you give me that option. Thank you, Fuji, for thinking about it. Next up on my feature list is future hardware. It's kind of a big thing, but I don't know if it's a big thing. What I would love is with the custom dial, to have this be e-ink like the exposure settings display is, so that I could see, okay, this one is aperture priority, and this one is drive mode change, this is HDR, this is video. Maybe just like 6-7 characters where I can just have enough in there that I know what it is before I even turn the dial. Currently, it does reflect it over in the this e-ink display area, but it'd be neat if it was on the dial, at least in my world. You've made it this far in the video. Thank you so much. So now we'll move to the conclusion, recommendation, kind of final closing thoughts here. So I've been using X series cameras since the X-T1 I got in 2008. And I've really enjoyed the process of using these cameras. It's a fun system. So you've made it this far in the video. Thank you very much. Let's conclude here with some overall thoughts, impressions, and maybe some recommendations for who this camera might be good for, as well as considerations of the other new generation sensor and processor cameras are coming out from Fujifilm. So first of all, as someone who's been using X-series cameras since 2008 when I got my X-T1, this camera, the X-H2S, is by far the biggest revolutionary jump in photo making and video experience of any of the previous generation of cameras that I've experienced with Fujifilm. So big jump in performance, especially around obviously the speed. And the video capabilities is expanded greatly. Image quality is pretty much the same as I mentioned as the other cameras. So you're gonna have a different and more expanded photo creating experience and options with this camera. So I think if that's what you're looking for, this camera can do it. Things to think about with this camera, though, is it's obviously not the smallest and lightest Fujifilm camera. So if that's important to you, there might want to consider other options. Also, at $2,500, it's Fuji's most expensive APS-C camera, so also a factor. Another thing to remember with the S, the speed stuff on this camera, is you're going to need CF Express Type B cards to take advantage of that. SD cards are not fast enough in writing and reading data to take advantage of all the video capabilities, all the new formats, as well as the additional speed of creating photos even at the high burst rate. So be aware of that. There's going to be an additional investment in this type of memory card, the CF Express Type B, which is not cheap. An additional expense to accompany the CF Express Type B cards is my suggestion to get a card reader, an external card reader for this. While you can hook the camera up to your computer, I always get a little leery of that, just because then you're connecting two computing devices together and operating systems talk to each other or don't. I've read online some issues with that. So I would go with an external card reader. The one I have is about $70. So this is the CF Express Type B card reader I chose from SanDisk, and as of the time of this video recording, it's on sale. So it's still an additional investment, so just be aware of that. In addition to the camera, you're going to be buying new memory cards, probably, because you probably don't already have these. If you're paying attention to Fuji camera news, you know that after the X-H2S was announced, there came out with the X-H2. Same body, but the difference is instead of having a 26 megapixel stacked sensor, it has a 40 megapixel non-stacked sensor using the same processor in both cameras. So you give up some of the speed for resolution. So also you save $500 with the X-H2 versus the S. So in addition to the cost consideration, there's some feature function differences between those two H series cameras. Around the video side of things, I just watched a video by Gerald Undone comparing the video functionality of these two cameras, and I'll leave a link for that below because he does a great job of talking about the video differences. From a photo side, I'll also link to a couple videos about the differences between the two X-H2S and the X-H2 from people who have used both cameras. I have not used the X-H2. My understanding in a nutshell is that it does everything really well. You get some really great image quality with that higher resolution sensor. You do give up video features, and the autofocus is, from what I've heard, not quite as speedy. There you go. Also in the news around Fuji cameras is the new X-T5, which should be announced sometime in November of 2022, from what I've heard. My guess, my pure speculation on that camera, if you want to add it to your consideration, is it will have the same 40 megapixel sensor as the X-H2 and the same processor in a traditional XT style body with traditional command dials on top. Command dials, control dials, whatever they are, the wheels with the numbers on them. That's kind of old school, and in a little bit smaller body without the larger grip. I'm guessing also, if I had to guess, it's going to be right around $1,700, maybe $1,800, so $200-300 less than the X-H2 US in price. And I'm guessing, if I had to guess, just because of the smaller body, you probably won't get 8K video. If you have some thoughts you want to add about what you think the X-T5 might or might not have compared to the X-H2, leave them below in the comments. My speculation is purely speculation and a guess based on, you know, my past experience as a person who's bought a bunch of cameras and just awareness of the thermal specifications of a smaller body and what you might or might not be able to do with heat dissipation and some features you might have to give up in that little bit smaller body around heat issues. So in kind of a final summary here, no matter what X series camera you might get of the new ones, the new 3, they're all great. There's no bad cameras in that bunch. There's no perfect cameras in that bunch. But if you're in the Fuji ecosystem or considering the move, it's a great time. I think they will all benefit from the increased performance of the new processor and sensor and create a more enjoyable, friction-free photography experience. So it gives you one less reason not to pick up your camera and go out and create some photos. And that's really what it's all about, what our cameras should do. They should be tools for us to help us do the thing we want to create and share with the world, and have the camera get out of our way as much as possible, enhance the experience, give us creative options in that experience, and just be fun. So there you have a collection of thoughts, not all the thoughts, but some of my thoughts on the X-H2S after 3 months of use. I'm really enjoying it. I'm looking forward to learning more about it, exploring all the capabilities with it, and look forward to using it for a long, long time ahead. If you have specific questions about this camera and how it might apply to your case, feel free to leave them in the comments below and let's talk about it. Look forward to that. If you want to follow more of my adventures with this camera, please subscribe to this channel and you'll get to see that. Mostly what I do is videos about once a week with some street photography in a city near me called Bellevue, Washington. And you can see the playlist for those videos right here. So that's it for now. I look forward to seeing you in another video soon. And so until then, you know what to do. You're going to stay safe, stay well, and have fun creating photos. Bye for now.